Hi, everybody. Daniel Aaron here, your host for an episode, an impromptu episode, an around the world episode of Your Vibrant Life. And I am so excited and delighted to bring to y'all today somebody who is a good friend, an amazing man, somebody who has created really powerful transformation. I first met Chaz Gaddy back in Bali probably 10 years ago. And we just got to be friends because we were inspired to be sharing with the world. When I learned his whole story, or part of his story, which you'll hear some of here, about transformation and how he lost an incredible amount of weight, won the Weight Watchers National Essay Contest, and how that has been such a part of his creation of wisdom and his ability to help people and to, for so many of us, for me included, weight and body image has been a challenge in my life. So to really meet somebody who's overcome that and learned so much from it and already helped so many people, it's a real blessing to have him here. So without any further introduction, Chaz, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot, Daniel, for being here. It really is interesting how paths weave in and out of this thing called life with different people. And I was just thinking about that as you were talking about, man, it's really been quite a journey just since we first met in that crazy little town called Ubud, Bali, and the journey that we've had since then and during that time as well. And so I really, I'm honored to be here for one, and I appreciate you asking me and joining you.
Yeah, awesome. I titled our conversation Two Formerly Fat Boys. And part of what I love about us being able to converse about this, well, one is it's a topic that men don't usually talk about. And oftentimes men don't sort of have the understanding or appreciation of the challenges that people go through, women especially, and certainly it's more women that go through weight and body image issues. And for those of you all watching or listening here that are hearing and saying, well, I don't have body image issues, or my weight's always been fine, I don't give a thought about it. Perfect, awesome, great. And I invite you to listen to what we're talking about, whether it's about body image or fat. We all have the same patterns that run through us, and challenges and things that we want to do or not do, or things that we want to take out of our lives or incorporate into our lives. And so listen through between the lines here of what we're talking about, and you'll get a lot of information that will help you whatever your situation is. Now, all that said, Chaz, I intentionally left my introduction of you a little bit vague. And will you tell us a bit about your journey and how you got to win that contest and what you've learned along the way?
Yeah, Daniel, let me kind of expand a little bit on something you just said, because I think it's really important. I think that obviously what you said is very accurate about the weight, and that generally being quote unquote a woman's issue. And for one, I certainly really struggled with my weight and body image. And so I think it's a much more expansive kind of piece than that. For me, is it really was about not just kind of identifying myself with my body and what I weighed, but underneath all that was more of a self-worth image, I think. And then I think that, all of us in some way, I think, have a piece of that. And for those that don't, right on, man, congratulations. But whether it's having too big of ears or nose, or a hair color, or too big a breasts or smaller breasts, or a big ass or no ass, or whatever it is, there's this piece that sometimes makes me or people, I think, feel less than. And then the other part of that is the struggle of my weight really is I think indicative of the struggle we can face in life in general, whether it's heroin or crack cocaine or gambling or pornography or working too much or whatever that piece is. And so I think that that's really kind of the metaphor for the whole journey, right? This thing that we're on is is that experience of, in essence, being disconnected from what I am, truly am, and this thought that if this or then that, or when this, then that, it'll be okay. When I lose the weight, when I make the money, when I get in a relationship, when I get married, when I get the new house, when I get the new job. So it's that piece for me. So that's part of what my struggle with the food brought me to understand, that it was this external thing of never being okay. And hey, look, I'm not going to say like there aren't moments even now with my body, you know, I'm just like, wow, man. One of the things I never realized is I always thought, man, I'm going to lose the weight and I'm going to have the six pack, you know, abs, and I'm going to go on to, life's going to be just normal and great after that. And the truth is, especially for people that had the weight issue I did, I was almost 400 pounds. I think you knew that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but there's another piece of that, right? I will never have that perfect body. And I never really took the time out to think about that, which is another piece of what expectations are in life, and specifically for me, or when I'm doing something, what is it that I'm expecting? And I realized that I wasn't always clear on some of the other pieces that were coming with my choice or my expectations. So anyway, there were so many like beautiful lessons in this, and I never really got that. I always saw my struggle as my struggle. I never saw it as like this unbelievable opportunity to learn and grow. And again, I think most of us have that in our life, whether it's finances, a relationship, or an event that happened to us. And so it was in kind of looking at that a little bit differently, you know, my relationship with my food, and starting to approach it in a different way, that things really started to change for me. And so just to kind of backdrop a little bit on my food addiction, and I've played with a few addictions in my life, as many of us have, right? But food is the one that stuck with me. It started at an early age. I truly was addicted to food, in particular sugar, and became obsessed with it, obsessed with my body. Food controlled my life. I mean, I would have extreme weight gains and weight losses, and the shame and guilt and embarrassment that I felt about that truly controlled and ran my life in a lot of ways. I would not go to places I normally went because I was so ashamed about the weight I had gained, or worried about what people would say, or I would change where I got my hair cut because I didn't want to see my normal guy see me as fat again. Going on a plane, and I was the guy walking down the aisle, and people were going, "Oh no, God, not next to me, please." And, trying to fit in an airplane seat, and so many pieces that on a constant and daily basis, food was my emotional whipping post. And it was what, again, I used to define myself. I was either beating myself up about what I just ate, or what I should be eating, or I wasn't dieting, or all the pieces that came along with it. And it just occupied so much, in essence, space in my life, and truly was keeping out the space for other stuff to come in there. And so basically what happened is I knew I was in deep shit. I mean, I was, like I say, almost 400 pounds. I was pre-diabetic. They wanted to put me on sleep apnea. I had sleep apnea. They wanted to put me on a CPAP machine. I was in deep sleep less than 5% a night. I did one of those studies where they put you in the hospital and all the wires are coming out, and eating Alka-Seltzer on a nightly basis. I mean, just on and on. When you're obese, which by the way is an epidemic in America now, more than 30% of America is obese, which is 30% above ideal body weight. This is the first generation of children that are not expected to outlive their parents in terms of years, which is a mind-boggling statistic if you think about the advancements in medical science. And so, I mean, there were so many signals and messages that I was in trouble with my weight, burning hips, eating anti-inflammatories every day, and just on and on. And it still wasn't connecting for me, because there was this piece of, like, I just made it all about me. it was like, dude, are you so weak that you can't lose this weight? And I mean, to literally wake up every day and go, man, today's the day I'm going to do this. I got to do it. And at the end of the day, being a pint of Ben and Jerry's and a bag of Oreos, like I just didn't get what was happening. And then it was, so I made it all about me. Like, I'm too weak. I'm not strong enough. I'm not disciplined. I have no willpower. I don't, you know. And so a couple things changed around that, but one of them happened to be something that I call Lunch with Dr. Bill. And this is when I had my restaurant in Redondo, Coyote Cantina. And a regular customer of mine, he was about 74, and he had started doing rounds again at Cedars-Sinai. And one day he invited me for lunch, and we met in Mid-Wilshire District. And so we're sitting there talking. I said, hey, Dr. Bill, you know, how's the rounds going? And he looks at me and he said, you know, Chaz, not so well. And I was kind of like, wow, what's up? And he said, why is that? And I'm like, why is that? He's like, because when I walk through those rounds and I see those obese people, I think of you, and I think you're going to be dead soon. And the reason that I invited you to lunch today was to tell you I think you need to have the gastric bypass. And I think that you need to go see my friend today. I love you, and I'm worried you're not going to be here. And that's why I invited you to lunch. It blew my mind, right? It blew my mind. Like it was so out of left field for me, but so needed. And of course, so what do? I order a salad at lunch. You know, I'm sitting there and I'm having this lunch going, oh shit, man, I want those chips. I want that bread, anything that is different than this salad, anything to make me feel better, to make that uneasy feeling in my stomach go away. So I left lunch, and right after lunch, I stopped at a store. I got 2 ice cream bars. I got some candy bars, and I just ate all of it, man. And just, once again, stuffing down the feelings, right? Which is something I'd learned to do really, really early on. And I won't divert too much in that, but certainly my relationship to food and my body developed at a pretty early age. And you know, that's the thing, is like food, especially any addiction, all this stuff is kind of weaved together in this unbelievable matrix. Us hooking up here all these years later via Skype is because of stuff that happened a long time ago. And it's this really beautiful web of how things to come together. But my relationship to food I was in trouble pretty quickly early on. And I didn't realize it, you know, as a child. And even now when I see what people are feeding their kids, man, it blows my mind. And so anyway, so I knew I had to change. And that conversation with Dr. Bill really planted the first big seed. And I would say that's the start, as well as we all need somebody like a Dr. Bill in our life, right? We need an honest advocate, somebody that's willing to call us on our shit when we need to be called on it. And it's sometimes hard in life to talk to those, especially that we care about and we love, and say, hey man, like, you know, it's like we're going to lose you or whatever, or I'm disconnecting, whatever that honest conversation is, because there is a tendency for very specific reasons, for our minds to want to avoid conflict. And oftentimes that's what those conversations are. But it certainly was a big piece for me in sending me in a new direction. And so it took a little bit of time, but after that, what I decided to do was, I was still in the restaurant business at the time. And this was a huge piece for me. I was like, man, I've got to change my environment. Like a restaurant is no place for a food addict to be. And just like, you know, would you tell a junkie, hey, why don't you go be a pharmacist, or, you know, suggest to an alcoholic they continue to work in a bar? No, I'm not saying people can't do those things, but man, it's really puts the pressure on an already, you know, very pressured situation. So I decided to sell my restaurant, which was a very big move because it was my financial security, and it was who I was, right? I was Chaz the restaurateur. That's what everybody knew me as. I mean, my life revolved around that business. In a very unhealthy way, right? Hanging out with restaurateurs and chefs and eating in restaurants and restaurant openings and menu tastings and all that went with that lifestyle. So I think that's another big piece, right? So we've got this thing with Dr. Bill, this honest advocate, and then this other piece of like being able to look into that mirror and just go, wow, man, this is what it's going to take for me to get a handle on it, right? Whatever it is. And in this case, it was my food. So that was a huge piece on changing my environment. And at the same time, I was in escrow to sell my restaurant. I decided to sell it, and I was in escrow. And my dad was going to retire early at 63. And while I was in escrow, 2 weeks before he's going to retire, he just had a basic physical, and they found bladder cancer. And 30 days later, colon cancer, different strain. So we pretty much knew he was going to die. And so again, the sadness of that, right, of him dying. But the cool thing was, at least now I was going to be out of my restaurant. I had some cash and I had some time, and I hung out with my dad for that year, which was another really important lesson for me, which was how I had always taken my time for granted in my life. And it's this thing, like most of us, like, don't really connect. And I see it now in even my mom now, and some older people, when they start to realize, like, time is limited. And in conversations with my mom, like, wow, I just had lunch with Betty last week and she died yesterday. Or, and so that was such a huge piece for me, this whole idea that, wow, my time is the most precious thing I have here. Right. And we kind of talk about that here and stuff, but I fully never, ever started to approach my life with an understanding of the importance of time. And basically the three things that I thought about this recently, where I spent most of my time in my life, right, was making money, trying to get laid, and pleasing people. Nothing wrong with money. Nothing wrong with getting laid. Both awesome experiences in life, right? But I never opposed to people pleasing, which is highly toxic. And so, to understand that and just go, wow, man, I never really consciously was aware of what I was doing in life. I was just kind of doing what everybody else was doing and what I was told I should be doing, and whether it's teachers or parents or culture or society or friends. And so that was another huge piece, that thing with my dad. And so when I started taking care of my dad, I go, man, I got to lose this weight. It's killing me. And I don't know if you've seen these before. So that was, I don't know if can you see that one all right?
Yeah.
So that was me that was the night I sold my restaurant, right? So that was at nearly 400 pounds. And so then I went to hang out with my dad and just be his primary caretaker and fight the insurance companies and the medical companies for a year. And during that time, I said, I got to lose the weight. And so I hired a nutritionist. And the nutritionist was a pretty strong believer in protein diets, similar to, say, Atkins. And so I started with her, and then the next week a friend called me and he said, hey man, I'm getting married in the fall. I want to go to Weight Watchers. I'm embarrassed about walking in that room full of women. Will you go with me? And I was like, hey man, sure. It seemed like a good idea. Several things that appealed to me. One, there was some accountability. We were going to weigh in every week. Two, we had some mutual support of each other, which I think is awesome for anything in life. And so then, and there was also a sense of competition in there between us, right? This kind of testosterone competitive thing, but in a good, healthy way. And so we walk into the meeting, and above the sign-up desk was this thing, win the Great Summer Slim Down Essay Competition. And so I told my friend, I go, dude, I'm going to win that. And he's like, yeah, whatever. And so the prize was $5,000 cash. Or a new $5,000 wardrobe and a makeover with a, whatever, fashion consultant or whatever. So I went home that night and I wrote my essay. And this is an interesting piece. And when I say essay, it was actually pretty short. You had to limit the amount of words. It was 150 words or less, which is much harder to do than writing with more words, and which is a good lesson also in focus. But anyway, so I wrote my thing. And over so you had to attend 4 months of meetings. And then in the next 2 months, you submitted it and they accepted the applicants and figured out who would win and all that. So that night, the first night, I wrote it down, how much weight I had lost. I said, I can't believe in 6 months I lost blah, blah, blah pounds, and here's what it did for me. Over the 6 months, I changed everything, or the 4 months that it took to submit. I changed everything except the amount of weight I lost. And I had said, I can't believe I lost 125 pounds, which obviously was very aggressive in what was actually 4 months, but the contest was 6. So I said, wow, in 6 months, I can't believe I lost 125 pounds. The next day, I called a guy who used to do my menus for me at the restaurant. And I said, hey, Patrick, we're going to put together this little booklet, man. I'm going to win this little competition thing. And so we actually made a booklet, and they did not have any awards. Weight Watchers gives you these little stars at 5 pounds and then at 20 and some different things. They didn't have any after 100 pounds. So I created my own stickers to give myself at 125 and 150. And the general consensus is that I would not win because I was losing weight too fast. Every week I was taking pictures, fronts and sides, and doing some notes. And they're like, wow, man, Weight Watchers doesn't like to see their people lose weight this fast. And rightfully so in some ways. I think that's right. But anyway, so the bottom line is 6 months later, man, I won that thing. And I had lost, I don't know if you can see both those. So I went from there to there in 6 months. And it truly was like an amazing experience. But I think the most powerful part of the experience is that it did not do what I thought it would do. Right? Again, it was like, okay, I'm going to lose the weight and life's going to be great. And I'm going to go back to whatever this life is going to be like when I lose the weight. And so in many ways, what I ended up with was a thinner version of a fat guy. Right? And I still had a lot of the same mentality. And I still was not healthy in a lot of ways in my life, and especially in my thinking. And so I had started working on a book years prior to that. And originally, the working title originally was The Confession of My Obsession. And it was just what you said about, it was kind of a man's take on being overweight because it is associated more with women. They are the big purchasers in the industry, but some of those core issues we all feel, right, emotionally. And so I went to Bali. I thought I was going to go to Bali and write this book and become a world famous author and make a bunch of cash and travel for the rest of my life. And while I did a bunch of traveling, I spent more money than I made. And so it was time to come back to the States. And so just a lot has happened since then, but most recently I'm really started focusing again on the writing, and I'm very close to a first draft. But it just upon reflection of the writing, to see even how much my writing has changed and how the book that I'm writing now would have been much different, or is going to be much different than the book I would have written then, and how that process of life occurs, right? How what I think I want at a certain point changes over time. And I believe that a lot of that has to do with, as I change individually and specifically energetically, if that makes a little sense. And so it's been this incredible process of me, of a couple things. Awareness and clarity. I think if I had to give 2 words to what's shifted the most in my life, it's been awareness and clarity, and understanding this kind of why I do what I do. And more importantly, with the weight loss, especially, why do I do what I don't want to do? And it's interesting. We all read books about how to this and how to that. And here's how you lose the weight. And here's how you become financially successful. And here, most of us at some level kind of know we need to quit blowing our paycheck gambling at the casino instead of, feeding the family, or quit doing heroin, or quit drinking, or whatever it is. So there was a piece of that for me. I'm like, oh man, I don't, and I've been in my share of therapy in my life, right? Some really good stuff and some not so good. But at the end of the day, I was still like, man, what's this missing link for me? What's this disconnect? And so it was really starting to explore that piece on kind of, okay, well, what are some of the basic reasons I do what I do, period? And and I'd never thought about that in life. And I don't think most people do. I mean, most people couldn't tell you the 10 basic systems of their body or how their mind works, or, you know. And so I started exploring some of those things and just applying it to my life, applying what I was learning to my life. And I think that that's a huge piece is we, certainly I, have to take responsibility. And there's nothing wrong with having a guru or a teacher, and teachers come in a lot of different ways in life, but nothing wrong with having somebody to kind of like say, hey man, I've been there, here's what's up. But the truth is, most of the time we got to go through it for ourselves to truly get it, right? You can lead a horse to water. And so I think that that's this whole process of transformation or personal growth, is like having the discipline to hang with it when this stuff comes up, because shit happens in life, right? And it happens to all of us in a different way. And some of it's not so pleasant. And so it's just, I think, really about going, wow, that truly can be a teacher and a lesson for me. And really like having the patience and the honesty. There's so many different pieces like to working through it, but I believe that there is some pretty unbelievable magic out there that can happen. And you know, I think I've said this term to you before, but I call it floating in the magic. And I think that once I get into this space, at least I've experienced, and I think we all can, there is more of an effortlessness to life. And it's I think that a couple things for me, and I've been in goal setting and masterminds and some things like that. And I think sometimes the focus is on the what. And while I believe the what is important, I believe a question that is far more important is the why. Why do I want what I want? Right? And then the other one is even the what. As I said before, my primary focus was cash and getting laid and pleasing people, right? And even when I hear people now say, yeah, I'm really clear on my goals, I know what I want. If I'm working with somebody, I've never heard anybody tell me at the top of their list is like peace of mind and contentment. And the committee is something we all, you know, face, right? I've got this great piece I wrote actually in Thailand called, you know, Voices in My Head. And right, the committee shows up, man. And that's the thing that stops us from everything, right? Is the committee. You can, you can't, you're not, whatever it is, whatever the conversations are. And I liken it to the trickster, right? And some of the conversations that this trickster has with me. And it's so badass to realize it's all just my own thoughts, right? I mean, it's an unbelievable piece to get is to look around and go, everything in this world, everything started with a thought. I mean, like, it's such a big, like, concept to me, right? And then to go, every single thing I've experienced in my life started with the thought, right? And sometimes the thoughts get so automatic we don't realize they're thoughts. But every single thing I've done, there's been a thought behind it. And that's I think it's a critical piece to the puzzle, right? And then when you start to go, oh, wow, so what is the thought? Right? And then there's some interesting stuff around it. Are they coming from me? Right? Like people, of course, they're in my brain. I'm like, I might have a different perspective on it than that. Right? And so anyway, so it's like when I realized that's a huge piece right there, like it all begins with thoughts. Our beliefs about ourselves are a collection of our thoughts, right? Everything is a thought. And so if you strip this thing down, right, what I call the liquid universe, you know, I've talked about that a little bit, but so we have this thing. So we are one of billions of people on this planet, and there's billions of galaxies, man. And that, again, is another mind-boggling kind of concept, right? And so out of everything in the universe and everything that we can see and feel and touch and taste, there is one common thread to everything. Hands down, this is an airy-fairy, although I do like airy-fairy and hippy-dippy, but this is, from a scientific perspective, there is only one thing we know to be true right now, and that is everything is comprised of energy, and made up of energy and has energy. That's the only thing we know to be true. Everything else is an opinion or a belief. Religion, right, is one of the big ones, right? And so that's what's interesting is oftentimes people get stuck in their opinion and belief as if it's fact or truth. And there is very little that is fact or truth. I believe if we start to move into a little more esoteric part of the conversation, I believe truth has a certain resonance, but everything has a resonance, right? And so if we go back to this piece of energy, our thoughts, which earlier I suggested all things have been created from and come from. And it's important to think how one single choice in our life can send us down a whole different river pretty quickly, right? Choosing to drink and drive, having unprotected sex, right? I mean, there's a multitude of things we can think about on how one choice sends things in a whole different direction. Well, guess what? Behind that one choice was a thought. Sometimes a little more conscious, oftentimes unconscious. But so back to this whole energy piece and the thoughts. So without questions, all things have energy. And then the second piece to that is all energy has vibration, and all vibration creates waves. Okay, that's kind of the simple Chaz's Cliff Notes version, but that's pretty accurate, right? And interestingly enough, I've started studying physics because like I'm trying to go down the rabbit holes and see just, and it's unbelievable to really start seeing. And then how all of this stuff then links up energetically, right, is pretty amazing. And so that's about it, man. That's kind of my premise on it is the energetic piece and understanding how that plays out. So one quick kind of last thought on that is that we have body, mind, and spirit we talk about. And so I actually think we as a human being are a little more detailed. I see us as body. I see us as mind, which is the mental aspect. So body's physical, the mental mind aspect. Spirit, I do have my opinions on what that is. Emotional being, and also energetic being, right? So if I start to look at those 5 pieces of why I do what I do or who I am and start to explore those a bit, it's really interesting, the common threads that start to weave back and forth through it all. And so that's you know me, I can ramble forever. Any questions?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Chaz. And so cool and inspiring to hear the story. You know, I didn't remember the amount, but to be almost 400 pounds and to be as flailing and sick as you were in many ways, and for it to be controlling your life in such powerful ways, and then to make a change is incredibly inspiring. You know, for me, I was never that big. I was overweight, and this is back in the 70s, 80s, and our definition of overweight and obese was different then, and yet it was paralyzing to my life in many ways. And I remember one particular moment as a teenager, and I was already had this natural athletic ability, but I was falling behind my peers because I was slower, and I got tired more easily just because I was carrying extra fat. And I remember sitting at my father's house one day, and I was watching sports on TV, and I looked down at my own leg, my thigh, and it just, to me, and this is part of the distorted body image, but it looked huge. Right. And I looked at it and I just felt so disgusted with myself. And the biggest thing was I felt like I can't do anything about this. You know what? It's out of my control. It's beyond me. And when I look back at the story that you shared with us, some key parts of it that you illuminated there was you had somebody that cared about you, that you respected, say, hey, you know what, something needs to change. I care about you here, right? With Dr. Bill and, what might be called an intervention in a way.
Absolutely.
Somebody cared enough to share something with you that presumably was maybe, even difficult or awkward for him to talk about. So that was one big piece. And then another was you made the choice to change your environment. And that's, you talked about selling the restaurant and realizing that, well, you could lose weight while being a restaurateur, but it would be a lot harder for you, just like the alcoholic in a bar. And environment is such a powerful thing. And for the people that I work with, oftentimes what comes up and what we share about is the old saying by Jim Rohn, we become the 7 people we hang out with most. So creating an intentional community, an intentional family around us of people that are moving in the direction that we want to be going in our lives is so powerful, right? And right now, where some of us are working and developing in our own transformational process, well, actually, and I'll go back to one other thing you said too, which is so vital and important, was that really what the food challenge was for you in some way was a way of symbolizing that what you didn't like about yourself or didn't accept about yourself.
Absolutely.
And I remember one day I was brand new to the New Age world shortly after I'd had some kind of awakening, and I was around this group of people. I was at Omega Institute. I was on the seasonal staff, and I was around these people that thought in different ways, were doing different things, and we're sitting at a picnic table, and this guy next to me pushes his plate away, and he says, "I think I'm sufficiently cut off from my feelings now."
That is awesome.
And I heard that like, what? And of course, as soon as he said it, it made complete sense. And I was still struggling with my body and my weight at that point.
Right.
And totally rang true. And, again, whether it's food or alcohol or exercise or kindness or whatever it is, we all have things that in ways feel out of our control or our ability to stop or start doing in our lives. So as you reflect back upon this incredible journey that you've had with your body and with food, what can you tell us about your values and how they've shifted and how they impacted the choices you made back when you were at your biggest, and how they impact you now?
So I think that another important kind of piece in life in general is I find that I have in the past, and people tend to talk kind of in sometimes vague or without real lack of clarity, and sometimes conflicting. And so first I want to clarify what I see as a value, right? Because there are lots of terms for values out there. Some of them are ethical or moral or core values or whatever. So again, I kind of link this back to what I was saying earlier about the fundamentals. My values for me are beliefs, right? That's what I see my values as. And again, my beliefs are just some collection of my thoughts put together. So some of my values, my core value, I think the most important one that has shifted for me and that I think everything else arises out of is a value of valuing myself. Like, I think that self-love is kind of cliche as that can sound. I think that truly is a value, right? To value myself enough, right? And to be connected enough to my own self-love that I don't want to abuse myself with food or a bad relationship or bad for whatever it is, right? So I think that if I love myself, right? And again, to get back to the energetic thing, I think that emotions and feelings have a vibe, right? I mean, there is an energetic quality to everything. Thoughts have wavelengths, sound has waves. And so I think that when I'm in this space, when this core of my being is a value of self-worth and self-love, I think it automatically has to shift everything around me, including how I value my time, right? And because how I value my time, if I'm truly connected to my sense of self-worth and self-love, I'm going to hang out in spaces that nurture me. I'm going to do things that nurture me, that feed my spirit. And so as opposed to like that relationship, ironically food, right? Food can be either. And there's nothing wrong with eating a creme brulee, all right, some Ben and Jerry's. But it's like when this whole vibe around it, right? When I was using the food in the way that I was using it. I mean, it's so ironic that food, the very thing that was supposed to nourish me, had become like this parasite, man, moving towards my being. It was unbelievable. So I think that, you know, the value for me is if I'm in this high space, this high vibe, let's call it, like of self-love, right? Because I believe that feelings and emotions do have energetic qualities to them, like anxiety and depression and fear and lay in bed in fetal position. That's low vibe stuff, right? And it seeks out and feeds off low vibe stuff. And if we get back to the committee and the trickster, that's their biggest tool in my world is fear, right? It feeds on fear. And if I feed it, man, it goes nuts. And so those things, the best, I think analogy I use that people kind of get is, so everything's made up of matter, as we've talked about. Everything has energy. So if water is water, right, it's H2O. If we speed that stuff up, it's steam. It's still H2O, but the vibration has changed its state. If I slow it down, right, it now becomes ice. It's still H2O, but the vibration is slowed down. The molecules are moving slower, so now it's ice. I believe the same thing happens to me, right, on an energetic level. And I think the thing that changes my state is my vibration, and the thing that affects those are my feelings and emotions, right? Which that piece you're asking about, that value is a core piece of that, right? So if I'm in this high vibe space, right, like think about it, when we're excited or we're creating or we're giving unconditionally or we're joyous, we're celebrating, that's a vibe. That's high energy stuff, man. That's floating up in the ether more, right? And when we're not, when we're stuck in that other space, right, it's heavy, thick, dark. What do we say? Like lightness and darkness, right? Good, evil, these duality does exist in the universe, right? Now, whether you want to call it good and evil, that may or may not, that's a different conversation, but duality exists in energy. It has to. There's a positive aspect of something and a negative, right? Protons and neutrons and electrons, and that's what energy is about, and that the interactions of those is the vibration. And so if we kind of transfer that, or if I transfer that to life and go, okay, like here's this mirror, I can look into nature and the universe and see how some things work and apply to my own life. Okay, so that means there's duality. For every good thought I can have, there's a bad thought I can have. For every good action, a bad action. For every good value, there's a bad value. It exists simultaneously, it has to, right? It's the whole philosophy of yin and yang, which, you know, I know you've explored a bit. And so the best example of that is so then if I go to this expansion contraction piece, right? So if I'm centered in and grounded in this belief, this value that I'm worth something, right? And even at a deeper level that I'm loved, and even more so I love myself, right? Because oftentimes it's this external validation of love or acceptance that I think, which by the way, I think is quite normal that we go after that based on our primal DNA of survival, right? Chances on us surviving or reproducing, which is at the core of our DNA, is if we're around other people, got a better chance of staying alive and or reproducing. So the mind trying to figure out how to go out there and be accepted is really natural, but it can get distorted in a lot of different ways, I think. But so anyway, just to kind of close that piece on the value, I think that when I value myself, and along with that comes this kind of awareness and a clarity, I think, right? Then what starts to happen for me, or what has happened for me, is I then value my time. And that means who I'm spending it with and how I'm spending it, which ties back into that environment, right? And then, because I'd much rather hang and watch a TED Talk or have a conversation like this, or you know, than just mindlessly channel surf TV. Like, there's nothing wrong with TV. I have nothing against people who watch it. I happen to watch very little of it now, you know, maybe an hour a week or something. I on the web a lot, and I like that. But I think that how I value my time is related on how I value myself, which is based on my beliefs. And the interesting thing is, if you start to look at beliefs, most of them were anchored in at a pretty early age in life. Most psychological models would suggest by the age of 7. And so you go, wow, that's some pretty heavy stuff, man. If what I'm doing now 50 years later, I learned when I was 7, because the stuff we needed to do to survive then is different. We didn't have the tools, right? Things happen, and some of it very real and some of it imagined. But there's some pretty powerful stuff that could get anchored in at a pretty early age that isn't based on anything about me, you know, as a child or as a human being or as an adult now. And so I think that it's being able to understand that and take a look at that. And that's that, again, that core piece, you know, the values for me then translate into everything else from there. Does that make sense?
That makes good sense. Yeah, thank you for that. And, you know, you mentioned early on that part of what was important to you, what you valued in those early days, was making money, getting laid, and pleasing people. And that part of your process was growing to value yourself and love and appreciate yourself more, and, you know, take care of your time and your surroundings in a different way. Maybe this will be my last question for now anyway. What has given you the ability to, how did you come to value yourself more?
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good question. And I've never really considered that, but I would have to say that it's nice, the spontaneity of the question is that I really think that just going through the pain and the struggle, right? The pain and the struggle, like, was a big piece of bringing me back to realizing that I wasn't the weight, right? And the way I was using that to kind of like keep and hold myself back. But there hasn't been, for sure, what I believe is there hasn't been one specific thing. It all feeds off of itself. Like I say, that mental and the emotional and the physical and the spiritual and the energetic piece. And that's where I got in trouble before, right? Before I was just like, okay, well, one, I wasn't aware enough to really realize what was going on, the complexity of my relationship, not just to food, but to myself and life, right? And so it was this thing on, okay, I need this answer, right, that I'm going to do. I'm going to go on a diet, and I'm going to, right, like, lose weight by cutting calories and exercising. And so what I think that the thing that brought me to that space, all right, so, and it's still an ongoing thing. Like, I'm not going to say I'm 100% there right now. Like, some things will still pop up now and then. I'm like, ooh, wow, okay, take a look at that, Chaz, right? But I just think that it's the whole process of being open and willing to have it being different than it is, right? Because it's so easy. I got so stuck in accepting less than in my life. And I think there are some very real reasons we stay stuck. And it's not all just this weird stuff out there. I think there are some energetic reasons we stay in homeostasis. Certainly physical, right? And mental and emotional, especially, and energetic. Like, and that's another topic for another time. But I think that the thing to know is there are forces at work that as soon as I start to move away from an established physical comfort zone, but certainly mental and emotional, there are forces that go to work to keep me in place, right? And there are some very natural reasons that happens energetically in the way energy works and flows, but it's a willingness to continue, like, to press. What do we say? He or she was out of their comfort zone. You got to step out of your comfort zone, right? So that it's just that starting point of going, man, I deserve more. Right? I want more and I deserve more. I think that is the stepping stone, because then I'm sending that out there, man, I deserve more. Right? And so I'm going to start to connect with stuff that says, yeah, you do. And then it just starts to unfold from there, man. It's about just keeping going despite the stuff that shows up, because we know it shows up.
Yeah, beautiful. All right, and then what would you say, having at one point in your life valued making money and getting laid and pleasing people? If you were to make a list of your values right now, what would be some of the top ones?
Well, I think the top one right now is really being conscientious of, again, it gets back to the clarity piece. This question of truly, what do I want? Why do I want it? So the value of putting that, and I have that, I check in with that at least weekly, right? So what do I want? Why do I want it? And there's nothing, by the way, nothing wrong with cash. I want cash, right? But I have a different relationship to it now and a different understanding. Like, I'll talk to them, oh, I want $1 million. And there's nothing wrong with wanting $1 million. I'm like, why do you want $1 million? Is 999,000 okay? Well, of course. Well, okay. Is 600,000 okay? Well, no. Well, why not? Right? Why do you need what you think you need? And that's, I ask myself that consistently. And then the other one is just kind of, my value of why am I doing what I'm doing? And then it's just this piece of, there's a magic that comes together for me that I'm experiencing, at this point in my life, that when I have that clarity, and it's not like it doesn't shift a little bit, right? Life throws these experiences at me that say, are you sure you still want that? Are you, but if I can, when I'm in alignment, right, with what I'm thinking, what I'm saying, and what I'm doing, that's where this magic starts to happen, because it truly is, right, a vibrational thing. It truly is and I know that, like, somebody told me, like, what's that mean, dude? All I can say is it's a vibrational thing, because if I'm clear and stronger in this energetic thing that I'm emitting, that everything, the rock beside us omits it, right? Everything has this vibration. So as I tend to raise up this vibrational thing by keeping my values in line, right, I naturally and effortlessly am connecting with other things that are at that same level. It's such a badass experience and process. And so, I don't know that specifically answered it, but it's just the value of who you are and the value of how you're spending your time, right? And what you alluded to earlier is really an important piece, man. Tribe is important, right? Tribe is really important, because when I spend my time around people that stimulate my conversation and my thought process, because and I think a lot of people get stuck, is lack of thinking, period. Just jumping in the hamster cage and going through it day in and day out. And I'm just going to do this till I'm whenever. And I buy my RV and travel around the States, or whatever. But this process of questioning everything you hear. There's so much misinformation out in social media in this day and age, and people pass it on as if it's truth. And anyway, that's kind of it, man. But
That's great, Chaz. And I think one of the best things you bring us there, and I'll reiterate, is what do I want and why do I want it? Something that I share about and teach a lot is the importance of getting to the why, and how that will overcome discipline. We all need a certain amount of discipline to do this or not do that. But when we really know the why of it, and this relates to our values too, well, why is this tops on my list of values, and why is this lower on my list of values? What does that bring in my life? Makes such a big difference. So
absolutely.
Fantastic. All right. Well, Chaz, it's been super cool to hear more from you about your journey and get your perspective and what you've learned from that journey so far. And I love that you've got the, awareness and humility to say, hey, you know what, this is part of my journey that's ongoing. And also something that I really embrace for all of us is we're all continually growing and learning, and there's always a next segment of our journey.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So fantastic. Thank you, Chaz. And if folks want to learn more about you or get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Yeah, right now, actually, my website is under new development right now, but certainly look for chazgaddy.com. And right now, you can email me at chaz@chazgaddy.com. I am getting the email now, but the site is down. for a little bit of some retweaking and lots of really cool stuff going on. And hopefully you guys will see the book on the market soon and you know, maybe be interested in that. So Daniel, I just want to thank you again for your time and awesome reconnecting and seeing that, you know, you're a beacon of light out there in the world, man, just sharing the torch, and that's all we can do.
Thank you, Chaz. I appreciate that. And I'll put the info in that you just said out loud so people can find you that way, and introduce you to our growing community too. And perhaps people can connect with you that way if you're interested in that.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
All right.
All
Thank
right.
you, Chaz. Thanks, everybody. See you soon.